Whatever happened to that super cool 1998 television special that reunited us with not only the awesome set of the Jupiter 2?
Everyone thought Lost in Space was just a fun show about a family floating around in rockets. But beneath all the action was a deeper story many viewers never noticed. Was the show trying to tell people something more than just a sci-fi adventure? And what hidden messages have fans only started to notice years later? Join us as we take a closer look at Lost in Space, uncover the deeper meaning behind the story, and reveal the details that could completely change the way you see the series. The show that looked like a joke but wasn't. When Lost in Space premiered on CBS on September 15, 1965, most people looked at it and thought, cool space show for kids. And honestly, that's a fair reaction. There is a guy in a silver suit and a robot waving its arms. There is also a villain in a cape complaining about everything. And on the surface, it reads like a cartoon. But here is what's wild. That same year, America was neck-deep in the Cold War and the space race. NASA was launching missions every few months. The Soviet Union was doing the same. The fear that the other side might get there first, wherever there was genuinely keeping people up at night. Space wasn't just exciting in 1965, it was politically loaded. Irwin Allen, the guy who created the show, knew exactly what he was tapping into. He described Lost in Space as science fact science fiction, meaning he wanted it grounded enough to feel real, even when it was clearly fantastical.
Childhood outer space characters lost in space forever?
The whole premise hinges on Earth being so overpopulated that the United States government has to launch families into space to colonize other planets. That is not a sci-fi concept in 1965. That's political anxiety wearing a spacesuit. The Robinson family was supposed to represent the ideal American unit. Dad is Professor John Robinson, a scientist and natural leader. Mom is Dr. Maureen Robinson, educated and capable. 3 kids, a pilot, a robot. Everything is orderly and optimistic and very, very American. The show was basically telling audiences, if Earth falls apart, we've got this. Our family can handle it. What nobody clocked at the time is that the show then spent 3 seasons systematically testing that fantasy. The family never makes it to Alpha Centauri, the mission never succeeds, and the guy who blew the whole thing up in the first place is still on the ship. Because the real story of Lost in Space isn't about space at all. It's about what happens when someone lets the wrong person through the door and what it costs everyone else. Dr. Smith was not who you think he was. Dr. Zachary Smith is the most interesting character in the show by a mile, and not for the reasons most people think. Everyone remembers him as the dramatic, cowardly, self-serving comic relief who insulted the robot and got the family into trouble every week. That version of Dr. Smith is hilarious. Jonathan Harris played him brilliantly, but that's not who Dr. Smith was supposed to be. In the original pilot, Dr. Smith is straight up dangerous.
Greetings. My name is Jonathan Harris, possibly better known to you as Dr. Zachary Smith of Lost in Space.
He sabotages the Jupiter 2 before launch, programs the robot to destroy the ship 8 hours into the mission, and when a security guard catches him, he physically attacks the man and dumps him down a waste disposal chute. This is not a buffoon. This is a spy and an assassin working for a foreign government trying to destroy America's space program. The original script apparently had him using a poisoned needle hidden in his ring to kill that guard. The network said that was too dark for a family show. But the point stands. Dr. Smith was written as a Cold War enemy agent, specifically a saboteur working for a competing foreign nation, trying to stop the United States from winning the space race. He's not accidentally on that ship. He is the reason the mission fails. The show's families gathered to watch on Wednesday nights sat on a pretty dark idea. The villain was already living inside the house. The threat wasn't a giant monster, a meteor, or an alien invasion. It was a well-dressed man who claimed to be a doctor, spoke politely, and walked right through the front door. That was a specific kind of 60s paranoia, packaged directly for American living rooms. Nothing sells primetime television quite like convincing parents that the polite professional standing in the kitchen might actually be a threat to national security. As the show went on, Jonathan Harris gradually softened the character into someone funnier and more theatrical. The network loved it, and ratings responded. But underneath the comedy was still the original idea. Here is a man who destroyed everything by betraying the trust of people who never should have trusted him. And somehow, he keeps getting second chances. How Dr. Smith went from Cold War villain to beloved TV icon is one of the strangest character transformations in television history, and it accidentally revealed something uncomfortable about what audiences actually want. The robot was smarter than everyone realized. Everyone knows the line, "Danger, Will Robinson," even if they have never watched a single episode of Lost in Space. The B-9 Environmental Control Unit, better known simply as the robot, became an instant sci-fi icon. But stripping away the nostalgia reveals a much stranger purpose. The machine was not just a sidekick or a walking piece of merchandise. It was a constant reminder of how easily technology fails the moment things get chaotic. It is pretty funny how people turned a clunky metal prop built to warn a kid about endless life-threatening disasters into a beloved childhood memory. On the surface, the robot is just a cool machine, a helpful assistant, or a funny sidekick. The machine starts as a literal weapon. Dr. Smith programs it to sabotage the ship, making it an immediate threat to everyone on board. Over 3 seasons, that same tin can transforms into the most loyal, protective, and emotionally present member of the entire crew. It flashes warnings before disaster strikes, repeatedly steps between Will Robinson and lethal danger, and slowly develops something that looks suspiciously like genuine affection. Scholars and fans who've analyzed the show note that the robot's evolution raises questions the series never directly answers. At what point does a machine become something more than a machine? The robot learns, it grows, it jokes around, and it shows concern. But it never gets a name. It's always just robot, because the family never quite stops treating it like property, even as it acts increasingly like a person. In 1965, this was culturally huge. America was genuinely wrestling with automation. Factories were changing. Jobs that humans did were being handed to machines. There was real anxiety about whether technology was a friend or a threat. And here was this show putting a robot in the middle of a family and asking, is this thing dangerous or trustworthy? Can a machine actually care about you? Should it have rights? The bond between Will Robinson and the robot is the real emotional core of the whole show. Will treats the machine like an actual friend, not just a tool in a metal box. The robot returns that feeling with total loyalty. That dynamic ends up being the most genuine human connection in the entire series, even though one participant is literally a pile of wires. A show doesn't build that dynamic by mistake. It forces a question. What actually makes someone family? It is pretty funny how a glorified toaster managed to demonstrate better family values than most of the biological adults on board. For a show that everybody wrote off as campy kid stuff, Lost in Space was running a surprisingly sophisticated philosophical experiment with a robot and a 12-year-old, and audiences didn't even notice. The real reason the show kept getting weirder. Here is a fact that gets glossed over way too often. Lost in Space completely changed its identity between Season 1 and Season 3, and zero planning went into it. The first season actually carries real tension and dark moments. The Robinson family faces real isolation, running low on vital supplies, while Dr. Smith still acts like a genuine threat. It feels like an actual survival story with real stakes. It turns out television writers in the 60s were just making up space survival on the fly and praying nobody noticed the tone shift. Then everything fell apart. By Season 2, the show switched to full color and total camp. Giant vegetables appeared. Carrots started talking. Space hippies roamed around. Entire episodes looked like they were typed up in 20 minutes by someone suffering from severe food poisoning. The vibe crashed straight from serious sci-fi into a trashy Saturday morning cartoon. What actually happened was Jonathan Harris. He figured out that the funnier and more theatrical he played Dr. Smith, the more the audience loved it, and the more screen time he got. He rewrote dialogue, improvised scenes with Bill Mumy, and essentially redirected the show toward himself, the robot, and Will Robinson, a trio that became the actual main characters, regardless of what the credits said. Irwin Allen went along with it because the ratings supported it. Guy Williams, who played Professor John Robinson and was supposed to be the lead, reportedly grew increasingly frustrated as his role shrank. He had been a fairly big TV star as Zorro. Now he was standing in the background of his own show, while the villains stole every scene. Cast tensions grew. June Lockhart and Williams were reportedly written out of 2 episodes as punishment after they were caught laughing uncontrollably on set during a particularly absurd scene involving a giant talking vegetable. The show went off the rails because one actor stumbled onto a gimmick that got views and refused to drop it. The network gave him free rein, forcing the rest of the cast to just deal with it. But ironically, all that absurd camp actually shielded the heavier message underneath. Slipping a story about a Cold War spy hiding inside a domestic household past the network censors was easy enough when everyone wore ridiculous alien suits. However, nobody pays attention to political satire when the bad guy is screaming a dramatic monologue at a robot. The campiness wasn't a creative failure. It was accidentally the perfect cover for everything the show was actually saying, and it worked so well that even the audience forgot to ask the deeper questions. The space race context, nobody can explain. Lost in Space was actually running a surprisingly deep operation under the hood. In 1965, the Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957. Gagarin hit orbit in 1961. America lagged, panicked, and dumped endless cash into NASA to catch up. Losing the space race wasn't some fantasy sci-fi plot. It was literally the headlining news. Lost in Space hit television right in the thick of this chaos. The premise that rival nations were racing into space and using sabotage to stop America was built straight into the foundation. Dr. Smith wasn't working for green monsters.
Let's talk about Lost in Space and why it was so popular, and it continues to be popular. Why?
He took orders from a rival government on Earth. The real danger wasn't floating in space. It was the geopolitical paranoia back home and the absolute mess that unfolds when trust breaks down at the worst possible instant. The Robinson family represented a very specific American propaganda dream. They were smart, capable, squeaky clean, and completely wholesome. Professor Robinson was even named John, sharing a first name and a very deliberate look with JFK, who was assassinated less than 2 years before the premiere. That choice wasn't subtle. The show pitched this family as the continuation of an American dream cut short by a bullet. Then the writers dropped a traitor onto their ship, kicked them off course, and never let them see Earth again. Whether Irwin Allen planned any of this or just soaked up the paranoia of 1965 America is hard to say. The point is, the show hit a nerve. Audiences were already panicking over new technology, Cold War paranoia, and an uncertain American future. The alien planets were just a backdrop. The real plot was a single family trying not to disintegrate while everything in the universe actively tried to destroy them. Lost in Space was a show about the space race that spent most of its time asking whether America was as solid and trustworthy as it believed itself to be, and it dressed that question up in alien costumes so nobody would notice. What the cancellation actually meant. The show dragged on for 3 seasons and 83 episodes before the axe fell in February 1968. The cancellation hit the cast in the most embarrassing way possible. Guy Williams discovered his job was gone when a reporter at a press event asked him about the season 4 schedule. The network executive sitting right beside him muttered that nothing was set in stone. That single awkward comment was the first clue Williams had that the entire operation had been scrapped. Marta Kristen, the actress behind Judy Robinson, remembered the cancellation painfully. June Lockhart got the news through a phone call. After 4 years of endless work, the studio just pulled the plug. The Robinson family never made it home, and the final episode was titled Junkyard in Space, featuring Dr. Smith trading away the ship and the robot to a literal space garbage man just for a meal. The decision came down to ratings and money. By season 3, the audience had skewed very young, which meant lower advertising value since advertisers wanted to reach adults with purchasing power. Production costs were rising. CBS made the call, and that was that. But there's something poetic and a little painful about how it ended. The Robinson family spent 3 years trying to get home. The show ended before they got there, and their journey just stopped mid-trip. Forget network budget cuts for a second. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, and Robert Kennedy was shot. The Vietnam War was a total nightmare, and American cities were literally going up in flames. Right in the middle of all that chaos, a show about a dysfunctional family wandering around lost gets pulled off the air without an ending, leaving everyone stranded in complete misery. The cast stuck together long after the cameras stopped rolling. Bill Mumy, Angela Cartwright, and Marta Kristen stayed friends for decades. Even Guy Williams held no grudge against Jonathan Harris, despite all the petty drama behind the scenes. Then there was Bob May, stuck sweating inside a heavy metal suit for years without credit or decent pay. Fans finally gave the guy some recognition decades later, turning an invisible stuntman into the show's actual soul. The show that never let its family find home became a strange mirror of the decade that made it, full of promise, constantly threatened from within, and ultimately unresolved. Why Lost in Space still hits differently today. The wild thing about Lost in Space is that studio executives just refused to let it stay dead. Netflix dragged it back out for a 3-season run, and every few years, some producer decides to dig up the corpse again. The paranoia built into the 1965 original is still fully intact. How do people handle finding out a trusted ally is actively stabbing them in the back? What keeps a family together when everything outside the front door wants to eat them alive? At what point does a bucket of bolts earn actual rights? And when a high-stakes government disaster completely falls apart, who actually takes the hit? The Netflix version updated everything visually and narratively, but kept the beating heart of the original. A family stranded far from home, held together by loyalty rather than luck, navigating a universe that doesn't care whether they survive. The robot in the Netflix version is even more explicitly a character asking questions about consciousness, loyalty, and what it means to choose your family. The Swiss Family Robinson in space still works because the Swiss Family Robinson framework is about endurance, not arrival. What the original movie was really about wasn't the aliens, the strange creatures, Dr. Smith's tricks, or all the over-the-top moments. At its heart, it was about one simple but powerful question. Can a family stay together when everything around them falls apart? When the mission fails? When there's no way home? And when the person they trusted is the one who caused the disaster? Can they still stay united and survive as a family? Week after week, the Robinson family kept finding a way to stick together. It didn't matter whether they were facing strange aliens, dangerous planets, or Dr. Smith, causing problems at every turn. They never gave up on each other. At its core, Lost in Space wasn't really about space travel or futuristic technology. It was about the people beside you when everything falls apart. The show's message was simple. When life goes wrong, family, trust, and working together matter more than anything else. That idea connected with audiences in 1965, and it's just as meaningful today. On the surface, Lost in Space looked like a cheap kids' show stuffed with rubber monsters and bad special effects. Underneath all the goofy retro chaos, the core narrative focused on betrayal, paranoia, and absolute disaster. Big existential themes got buried under ridiculous plot lines, so most people just remember the silly props. Wrapping bleak ideas inside a tacky sci-fi package turned out to be a brilliant trick, making it one of the most accidentally dark shows in TV history. Did you see the deeper story when you first watched it? Or did it take this video to completely change how you see it? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.